The Great Lizard Hunt, Eleanor's Hilarious Misadventure. Written and read by the author, Kara Jones. Chapter 1, The Unexpected Favor. It all started with a knock at the door. Eleanor was halfway through her morning coffee when her friend barged in, holding a tank with a lizard in it. "Eleanor, I need a favor," her friend began, her tone dripping with desperation. "I just need you to babysit Larry for a few hours. He's harmless." Eleanor squinted at the lizard, who was perched on a rock, blinking. Babysitting a lizard wasn't exactly on her bucket list, but she couldn't say no. "Don't worry," her friend said, handing her a cricket in a plastic bag. "All you have to do is feed him this and make sure he stays in the tank. Easy." "Famous words," said Eleanor. Eleanor thought she had reluctantly accepted the tank. Famous last words, Eleanor thought as she reluctantly accepted the tank. She watched her friend disappear out the door, leaving her alone with Larry and his single cricket. "Well, Larry," she said, peering into the tank, "it's just you and me now." As she set up Larry in her living room, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was going to go horribly wrong. She Googled how to babysit a lizard, but didn't find much besides a video of someone feeding a giant iguana. "Great," she muttered. "I'm on my own." Little did she know Larry had other plans. Eleanor left the room to make herself a snack. When she returned, Larry was gone. "What the?" she whispered. "What the?" she whispered, staring at the empty tank. She checked under the tank, inside the cricket bag, and even behind the couch. But Larry had vanished. Panic began to set in as she realized she had just lost her friend's beloved pet. The search was on. Eleanor armed herself with a flashlight and got down on her hands and knees. She crawled around the living room, muttering, "Larry, where are you?" It was only the beginning of what would become the Great Lizard Hunt of 2024. Chapter 2, Houdini on the Loose. Eleanor's first thought was to retrace Larry's steps, if lizards even had steps. She crouched by the tank, looking for any gaps or cracks he could have used to escape. Nothing. How does a lizard just vanish? She shook her head, realizing that Larry wasn't your average lizard. He was Houdini, reincarnated. She flipped the couch cushions, fully expecting Larry to be hiding there. Instead, she found 3 missing socks and a stale cracker. "This is not helpful, Larry," she yelled into the void. Her cat, Whiskers, sat on the windowsill watching her with judgmental eyes. Whiskers seemed to silently say, "This is why we stick to cats, Eleanor." The search expanded to the kitchen. Eleanor opened every cupboard, checked behind the fridge, and even peeked into the toaster. Nothing. At this point, she was sweating, her nerves frazzled. "Am I losing my mind?" she asked Whiskers. The cat yawned in response. Desperation led her to the internet. She Googled how to find a missing lizard and clicked on the first link. It was a forum filled with advice from other frantic lizard owners. One owner suggested, "Think like a lizard." Eleanor groaned. "What does that even mean?" she muttered. Still, she decided to give it a try, so she lay flat on the floor, staring under furniture, and whispered, "Larry, Larry, come back, come back." The absurdity of her situation hit her, but she didn't have time to laugh. Larry was out there somewhere, and she wasn't giving up. Chapter 3, A Neighbor's Concern. Eleanor's muttering must have grown louder because there was a sudden knock at the door. Startled, she scrambled to her feet and opened it. Her neighbor, Miss Thornton, stood there with a concerned expression. "Is everything all right, dear?" "I heard yelling," she said, clenching her pearls. Eleanor froze. How was she supposed to explain this? "Oh, I lost a lizard," she admitted sheepishly. Miss Thornton's eyebrows shot up. "A lizard?" she repeated, her voice a mix of disbelief and mild disgust. Eleanor nodded, feeling her cheeks flush. Miss Thornton peered into the house as if expecting to see the lizard lounging on the couch. "Well," she said slowly, "good luck with all of that." She turned and shuffled back to her house. Shuffled, leaving Eleanor feeling even more ridiculous. As the door closed, Whiskas meowed loudly, as if mocking Eleanor's situation. "Thanks for your support, Whiskers," she said sarcastically. The cat flickered its tail and went back to grooming itself. Eleanor sighed and picked up her flashlight again. If Larry was in this house, she was going to find him. Neighborly judgment. Chapter 4. The Lettuce Bribe. Eleanor remembered something she'd read on the lizard forum. Use food as bait. She grabbed a piece of lettuce from the fridge and placed it on the floor. "Come on, Larry," she coaxed. "You know you want it." She sat back and waited, her eyes fixed on the lettuce like it was a winning lottery ticket. Minutes passed. Nothing happened. Maybe he's not a fan of lettuce. She added a slice of cucumber for good measure. Still, Larry didn't show. Eleanor groaned and flopped onto the floor. "This is hopeless," she muttered. Her phone buzzed with a text from her friend. "How's Larry?" Eleanor stared at the screen, her heart racing. Should she confess? Should she lie? She opted for a vague response. "He's exploring." Technically, it wasn't a lie. Just then, she heard a faint rustling noise. Her heart leapt as she turned her flashlight toward the sound. But it was just Whiskers pawing at the lettuce. "Great, now the cat's mocking me too," she muttered, shooing Whiskers away. Eleanor was running out of ideas. She leaned back against the couch, her mind racing. She had to find Larry before her friend came back. Failure was not an option. Chapter 5. The Cat Conspiracy. As Eleanor sat there staring at the untouched lettuce, she became acutely aware of Whisker's presence. The cat was perched on an armrest of the couch, tail flickering back and forth like a metronome. Whiskers looked too smug for Eleanor's liking. "Did you see where Larry went?" Eleanor asked, narrowing her eyes at the feline. Whiskers blinked slowly, the universal cat gesture for, "I know, but I'm not telling." Eleanor sighed. She had always suspected that Whiskers enjoyed chaos a little too much. She decided to follow Whiskers, hoping the cat might lead her to Larry's hiding spot. Whiskers sauntered into the kitchen, her tail high in the air, and stopped in front of the pantry. Eleanor's hope soared. "Is he in here?" she asked, flinging the pantry door open. Inside there was no Larry, just an avalanche of canned goods and toppled onto the floor. Eleanor yelped and scrambled to pick them up. Whiskers meowed loudly, as if laughing at her. "You're no help at all," she grumbled, shoving the cans back onto the shelves. Eleanor was beginning to think this was a game for Whiskers. The cat clearly enjoyed watching her spiral into madness. If I don't find Larry soon, I might end up in a lizard jail. Chapter 6. Google's No Help. Eleanor decided to revisit Google for advice. She searched best ways to find a missing lizard and clicked on a blog post titled Reptile Rescue, Tips for the Desperate. The first suggestion was to look in warm, dark places. Warm and dark, Eleanor repeated, scanning the room. Where would I go if I were tiny, scaly escape artist? She checked behind the TV, under the radiator, and even in her slippers. No luck. The next suggestion on the list was to use sound to lure the lizard. Play a recording of cricket noises, the blog advised. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. Where was she supposed to find cricket sounds? She improvised by holding the cricket bag up to her phone and recording the cricket chirping. She then set the phone on her floor and hit play. The sound of the lone cricket filled the room. Eleanor crouched nearby, holding her breath. For a moment, it seemed to be working. She heard a faint rustling noise near the couch. Her excitement built as she crept closer. But when she peeked behind the couch, it was just Whiskers again, chasing her own tail. "You're going to drive me insane," Eleanor muttered. Chapter 7, The Flashlight Revelation. As the hours dragged on, Eleanor's determination began to waver. She slumped onto the floor, her flashlight still clutched in her hand. "This is ridiculous," she muttered. "I can't believe I'm losing to a lizard." She aimed the flashlight at random spots, hoping for a miracle. The beam of light swept across the room, landing on her purse, which was propped up against the coffee table. Eleanor froze. Was it her imagination, or did the pursuit just move? Slowly, she crawled toward it, flashlight in one hand and a shoebox in the other, just in case Larry needed containment. Her heart pounded as she reached for the purse zipper. "Please don't jump out and attack me." With a deep breath, she unzipped the purse and shone the flashlight inside. There, curled up like he owned the place, was Larry. He blinked lazily at her, completely unfazed. Eleanor let out a loud, relieved laugh. "You little snake!" she exclaimed. Larry didn't budge. It was clear he had no intention of leaving his cozy new home. Eleanor scooped him up, carefully placing him back in the tank. "You've got some explaining to do, buddy," she told him, shaking her head. Chapter 8, A Lesson in Lizard Psychology. After securing Larry in the tank, Eleanor sat on the floor, exhausted but victorious. Why the purse? She wondered aloud. She pulled out her phone and Googled, "Why do lizards hide in weird places?" The search results were less than helpful. One article suggested that reptiles seek out safe zones that feel enclosed and warm. Another said they simply like dark spaces. So basically, Larry's a fan of leather interiors, Eleanor muttered, rolling her eyes. She glanced over at the tank, where Larry was now lounging on his rock as if nothing had happened. "You're lucky you're cute," she said. He flicked his tongue in response, which Eleanor decided to interpret as an apology. Whiskers, meanwhile, was curled up on the couch, looking smug. Eleanor pointed a finger at her. "And you could have helped, but no, you just sat there like a furry little critic." The cat stretched and yawned, clearly unbothered. Despite the chaos, Eleanor couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of the day. Babysitting a lizard wasn't exactly how she'd planned to spend her time, but it was definitely a story she'd never forget. Chapter 9, The Friend's Reaction. Eleanor debated whether or not to tell her friend about the whole ordeal. On one hand, she didn't want to sound incompetent. On the other hand, the story was too good not to share. When her friend returned, Eleanor handed over the tank with a smile that was equal parts relief and pride. "Larry was adventurous," she said. Her friend raised an eyebrow. "Adventurous? What do you mean?" Eleanor launched into a full tale, from Larry's escape to the purse discovery. By the time she finished, her friend was doubled over with laughter. "Oh, yeah, he does that sometimes," her friend said between giggles. Eleanor stared at her, speechless. "You knew he was an escape artist and didn't warn me?" Her friend shrugged. "I figured it'd be a fun surprise." Eleanor shook her head, muttering something about needing new friends. Still, she couldn't deny that the whole experience had been oddly rewarding. Larry might have been a handful, but he'd given her a story she'd be telling for years. Chapter 10, The Moral of the Madness. As Eleanor sat down that evening with a well-deserved cup of tea, she reflected on the day's events. Babysitting Larry had been chaotic, stressful, and downright ridiculous, but it had also been hilarious. She realized that sometimes life throws you curveballs, not to frustrate you, but to remind you to laugh. If I can survive a runaway lizard, I can survive anything, she thought, smiling to herself. Whiskers jumped onto her lap, purring contently. Eleanor scratched behind her ears, grateful for the company, even if the cat had been no help during the crisis. From that day on, she decided to embrace the unexpected, knowing that every mishap could turn into a great story. And Larry? Well, he became her unofficial mascot for resilience and humor. As she opened her journal to record the day's events, she paused and wrote the title, The Great Lizard Hunt. This one's going into the archives, she said with a chuckle, closing the book. The end.